Hello, and everyone, and welcome to Buzzworthy Live. Today, we're looking at how strong partnerships can help associations grow non-dues revenue and create real impact for their members. Not just sponsorships for visibility, but real collaboration that helps associations solve problems, share expertise, and stay ahead through change. I'm joined by Bruce Rosenthal, corporate partnership strategist and author of Mastering Association Corporate Sponsorships. Bruce has worked with associations across industries and turned traditional sponsorship relationships into true partnerships that deliver value on both sides. Bruce, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Marcus. Good to be here.
So, Bruce, associations have been handling a lot of change this year, as no surprise to anyone, including policy changes and workforce challenges. What kinds of pressures are hitting hardest right now, and how are they affecting members and revenue?
Well, all these changes have the potential to affect revenue in a detrimental sort of way. Associations losing grants, possibly members who can't afford to maintain their memberships. Um, but I think it's also creating opportunities. And I've talked to a lot of associations who are kind of wondering, well, how will this affect our corporate partners? What should we do about this? And my answer is call your corporate partners and ask them, or start creating a task force. Or if your association's members are involved in manufacturing, put together a task force on the impact of tariffs and bring the companies into the room. Because something I learned from a very smart association CEO years ago was the association's members and the corporate partners' customers are the same people. The association and the corporate partners are trying to help the members of the association solve problems. And as much as association staff are out there all the time in communication with members, and regional staff out there going to state affiliate meetings and all that, the companies are also out there every day talking to members, their customers, and identifying their needs, or developing new products and services, or doing research and development on members' needs. So bringing that thought leadership together and that expertise and truly partnering with the association and their corporate sponsors to solve members' problems.
Yeah, we've heard a lot personally from folks that are really taking a hard look at their business plan this year in terms of where are they going to pull in revenue from places that no longer are available to them. Have you heard the same thing?
Yeah, there's definitely a need for the revenue. I think the challenge is we associations have handled sponsorships the same way for many, many decades. And it's usually we need money, then let's call a company and offer to place their logo somewhere. And the harsh reality is, a couple of harsh realities, companies really don't care about associations per se. Companies care about how the associations can help the company achieve its goals and objectives. Um, so it can't be just we need money, because most of that money from the companies is coming from the company's marketing budgets, which have become a very competitive area now. So whereas years ago, the associations were kind of sole source and the only way that companies could reach and teach members, now companies realize that there are a whole range of ways that they can reach and teach members. And there's trade press, there are the state affiliates, there are for-profit trade shows and networking events. There's social media, which is a whole new way that companies can now curate their own online communities of members of the association. And they couldn't do that 10 years ago. And of course, what we learned in COVID is that all of our members know how to sit in front of a Zoom screen. So companies don't have to wait for the next association event, or for the next association webinar that might be months later. The company can basically go out to its own curated list of the association's members and say, we're doing a webinar in 6 weeks, and here's the Zoom link or the Teams link, and come on and log in. Now, I think it's always important to add to that, companies would rather do that with associations. And it can either be on the association's platform or the company's platform. I was talking with a corporate partner along with an association client a couple years ago, and the association was saying, well, wow, we could bring your company in. You could be a panelist on our webinars. We get 300 people at our association's webinars. And the company said, well, we also do webinars and we get 1,500 to 2,000 people at our webinars. But the opportunity that we created was the company said, what we as a company often lack is the thought leadership from the association, the credibility of the association. So it's strictly an educational webinar, not a sales webinar, but the win-win became a couple thought leaders, a couple committee chairs and staff experts from the association being on the panels for the webinars that the companies were hosting to reach these 1,500 to 2,000 people. So the members got good information. The association got an audience that was much larger than it had before, possibly got some new members out of it. And the company really was able to tap that credibility and expertise of the association. So that became the true partnership. And that's what companies will pay a lot more for. Usually they will not pay more for additional logo placements, visibility, recognition, and shout outs from the podium.
Oh, that's great. So there's never been a time where buyers have more opportunity in front of them to be able to target their potential buyer, right? So associations really need to think about, like, are we creating a good value proposition that's going to be competing with all those other potential areas for their spend?
Exactly. So I think it's recognizing what are all those other opportunities, and they may not all be the best opportunities, but um, I mean, companies are also doing, as we said, their own webinars, their own events, their own hosted kind of buyer meetings, focusing on education, not on the sales aspect. So I think it's first associations being aware that there is competition, and the competitive analyses that I'm working on with associations in some cases now are identifying 40, 50, 60 competitors, online sources, other places that members can go, other places that sponsors can go, other places members and sponsors can go together to network and learn from each other, that are totally, off the turf of the association. So a lot of opportunities for companies to reach members. The advantage the associations have are the association's brand, and we often don't think of an association brand like we would think of a major cola brand or a car brand, but associations have brand equity and brand value. And associations also have segments and subsegments of members that companies are often very interested in reaching. So again, this flips the model because for these many decades of traditional transactional sponsorship programs, we have assumed that the more people in the room, the more money companies will pay. And what we're finding now is the companies would much rather reach the right people in the right forum, the right segment at the right time, than to have a message blasted out to large numbers of members or even to participating in a large general session at a conference. So I worked with a number of companies where we started off thinking, well, would they like to get their logo on the hotel key cards, reaching 9,000 members? Or would the company rather do 2 or 3 focus groups at the association's convention with the support of the association, finding the meeting room, helping curate the list of members, those right members in that right segment to come to the focus group, to help the company arrange for the food and beverage at the focus group that the company will pay for. And that's when companies do their ROI, and companies will say, wow, if we reach 60 members in 3 focus groups, and then of those 60 contacts, 12 of them turned into meetings and 4 of them turned into contract proposals and 2 of them turned into contracts, they got 2 contracts as a result of 60 interactions with folks. That can be far more value than speaking at a general session where a company might introduce a speaker in front of 2,000 people, where as soon as the company starts the introduction, we all look down at our cell phones and no interaction. So those focus groups also should be educational. It shouldn't just be on the company's products or services, but even if companies are just asking, what are the major pain points, what's keeping you up at night as a member, as a professional, as a company, and working with members to satisfy members' needs. And then for the association, frankly, to monetize that and bring in those companies as partners.
Well, that's great. I think it would be useful to just to dig in a little deeper in terms of perhaps you can give some more practical examples on how associations can move beyond a transactional mindset and get into more of the partnership and kind of sustainable revenue focus.
Sure. I think the first step in improving or creating a better corporate partner program is to get the buy-in of the association CEO or executive director. This really needs to be um, an overarching goal, something that all departments in the association will be involved in some way. And we really need the support of the top chief executive. And when I used to work at an association, I had that total support of the CEO. When I started working on the program, I remember going to him and saying, "Oh, we have a corporate partner who's going to be in town in a couple of weeks, and do you have time to meet with that corporate partner?" And he said, "Don't even ask me. Go to my executive assistant, get it on my calendar. I will be at that meeting." Or when that association CEO was traveling around the country, I had access to his calendar, and if I saw, oh, he's going to be in Chicago and next month, and one of our corporate partners has a headquarters in Chicago. Can I get it on the CEO's calendar between his other engagements in Chicago to stop by that corporate partner's office for an hour to meet with the corporate execs? So definitely important to get the buy-in from the CEO. Um, and also then to get the buy-in from staff and recognizing that we need to provide value for the companies to achieve the company's ROI, not to sell for the companies, not to endorse their products or services, but to truly partner with the companies. And that partnering is not about putting more logos on more things. It's really identifying all of the assets that the association has. What are the communications channels? What are all the different ways that the association reaches out to members? What are all the different task forces and forums and online communities that the association has where companies could be part of those conversations? Because companies would much rather be part of the conversation than sponsor a conversation. So historically, we've gone to companies and we said, "Oh, you're a marketing company. We're doing a marketing webinar. And if you sponsor this webinar, we'll put your logo on the first slide and the last slide." And the company kind of scratch their heads. It's like, well, we're a marketing company. It's a marketing webinar. Can we get a seat on the panel for that webinar? And again, not to sell, but to educate members and for the company to show its expertise. So helping all staff understand that this is truly about partnering with companies that in many cases are out there reaching members anyway. So we need to bring these companies inside the association's tent. And I think that thirdly, to really change the mindset from selling sponsorships to exploratory calls and partnering with companies. And I have a slide in one of my PowerPoints that the word partner is a noun and a verb. And we often say, oh, we use it as a noun. That company is our partner. Yay. But are we truly partnering and using it as a verb to bring those companies inside the tent and work with the association on the common challenges that face their customers, the association's members? And to bring that together. So getting the buy-in from the CEO, getting the support of association staff, and changing the mindset from a sales mindset to really a relationship building exploratory mindset of working with companies to partner.
I think that's a really great mindset, especially within like the current environment and with the opportunities that buyers have to really adopt that mindset. I mean, ultimately, it's just even as if you were a salesperson, that's just a good strategy to move forward as a salesperson to position your association for getting the best possible kind of result out of those kind of calls. Can you give us some practical examples of how this approach is resulting in good member value? Not just necessarily the sponsorships, which are more important than ever, but that these things really go hand in glove. Can you give us some examples of how digital sponsorship or other types of sponsorship can be a member benefit?
Sure, and I'm glad you framed the question that way. It is always about members first, members along with the association's mission. So any sponsor partner relationship that does not benefit members, that is not in alignment with the association's mission, is a partnership that shouldn't happen. And again, that's a somewhat different mindset for associations. And I know when I used to to be VP of partnerships at an association. We had a company who was asking for more and more and more and wanted to pay less and less and less. And I went to my boss on staff and I said, what should we do? And he said, we're not going to have a partnership with them this year. We cannot do more and more and more for less and less and less money. So all partnerships do not have to happen. So a few examples, and actually one goes back to pre-COVID and COVID. I had been working with an association to revamp their corporate partner program in 2019. We delivered our recommendations to the association on a new partner program with new pricing and new categories and new benefits and new outreach and a targeted list of companies. We delivered those recommendations in February of 2020, just as COVID hit. And my first thought was, well, has all this been for naught? Are we going to be able to advance this program? But we started with, what do members need? It was an association of medical surgical nurses who were on the front lines during COVID, in the hospitals, treating COVID patients, and they needed better information, better guidance on how to help this onslaught of patients with respiratory challenges. So we reached out to one of the association's sponsors. They'd been, I think, a $5,000 conference sponsor. And we talked about positioning the company as a thought leader, not to sell the company's old respirators, not to sell the respirators, but to help nurses with better guidance on how to help patients that had respiratory challenges, of which there were unfortunately many during COVID. And so we shifted the relationship from the $5,000 conference sponsorship around logos on tote bags to a $40,000 year-long partnership with the company providing white papers and videos and guidance to members. Again, not about the product, but about how to help patients. Now, the other thing that was interesting about that model, so actually, first of all, not only helping the members, but helping the members help the people they were taking care of in hospitals. So really getting right to the end beneficiary. But what's interesting about that is that the nurses have no purchasing authority. They could not sign a purchase order for those respirators. However, they were influencers. So often associations are thinking, oh, our members don't buy anything. How is that going to work? How will we ever get a partner in here? If the members in some way, and whether it's in a hospital setting or an education setting or an office setting, if they are influencers, that can be enough for the company to say, yeah, if those nurses actually go to their bosses and say, yeah, here's a company that provided us with really good information. Next time we're reviewing bids, let's consider this company because they really know their stuff and they've been very helpful to us in helping us take care of patients. Another example, which is a very small association. So everything that Marcus and I are talking about today applies, whether it's digital or other benefits, apply to the smallest associations to the largest associations. It's just a question of scale, but all very applicable. An association exec with a small healthcare related association came to me a few years ago, and we almost turned down the consulting project because she had a staff of 5. And she said she was going to be the point person and drive the relationship with us as the consultants in helping her revamp the partner program. And we said, okay, if you're going to be there for all the weekly calls, and we're going to talk about, what your corporate partners need, what your members need, new ways of packaging, pricing, taking it to market. And true to form, she was there for every call. And a few months later, we launched the new program. She sold, so she also had just conference sponsorships. She transitioned to year-long corporate partners, brought in enough money in the first 3 months. She was able to hire a staff person to help her run the program. So a good business model of kind of ramping up as the money comes in. And we kind of set her on the path with how to take it to market and how to build those sales relationships with companies. And a few months after we wrapped up the engagement, she sends me an email and says, guys, we got to get on a Zoom call. I got a problem. So we get on a Zoom call and we said, how's it going? What's the problem? She said, I'm sold out. We had set this up for 6 year-long corporate partners because that was our capacity based on staff and member opportunities to reach out. I'm sold out. And we said, that's a good problem to have. So keep a waiting list, keep those companies close, offer them a booth or some ads or something else. Things do change over the years, so there may be other opportunities or opportunities to grow the program beyond 6 corporate partners. But that was a very small association with about a $2 million budget and 5 staff. It was very successful. And the third example that comes to mind is a much larger association, about a $40 million budget, so a much bigger staff and board to get engaged, and we revamped the program. And their director of sponsorship, as part of his internal strategy, he meets regularly with the head of every department on staff and talks about how can your department help our corporate partners help your department. What is it that your department's trying to achieve? Is it a new education program or a mentoring program or a program to focus on our younger members or new to practice members? How can we truly work together? And that's something that never happened before. The different folks on staff were just told, oh, we'll help these corporate partners with this, or let's do this for corporate partners. Or the different department heads would go off and try to sell their own sponsorships to companies, which didn't turn out well. So when the director of sponsorship for the association really started with how do we develop a partnering mindset and structure internally so we can then use that to leverage better corporate partnerships with the companies that we're working with. And that became their win. So everything from the small association with modest $40,000 partnerships to that larger association that was $150,000 partnerships. But it really came down to adding value for the association and its members first, and then how can we leverage that to add value for the companies and keep them in the fold as corporate partners.
Bruce, in your book, you talk about how internal alignment and a mission first mindset are key to lasting success. I'm wondering, can you offer some advice to folks that are hearing your message here today and are thinking, hey, how do I go about what are some examples of people that have been successful in terms of shifting that mindset that we've been talking about today and getting that alignment?
Well, that internal alignment is important to the success of a corporate partner program. Associations have all of these assets and communications channels and in-person conferences and webinars and databases and segments of members and audience segments and all of that. However, those are often in different departments, and especially in larger associations, we've all sometimes talked about silos in associations. And the companies, the sponsor partner companies are sponsoring with the whole association. They're not sponsoring a department or an individual. And the companies usually look at it as one entity. So even in some of the modestly sized and larger associations, sometimes the companies are telling me they're getting 4, 5, 6 different sales calls for different things during the year. We're getting the call from the booth person. There's an outside agency that sells ads. We have a public policy department that's selling webinars. We have a department that's doing general support and wants gold, silver, bronze, platinum, styrofoam, whatever, different levels of sponsorship. And the companies are like, we're really confused. Plus, this is a lot of work to figure out. Oh, it's different purchase orders, it's different schedules, it's different terms of the sponsorships. Companies are much more interested in investing in the overall organization, and that also involves bringing together all the staff and recognizing we are a large organization or a modest-sized organization. We have a lot of different assets or things that we could offer to companies. And let's look at ways of packaging those and customizing those. So not pre-packaging them. So not having those, if you're a gold partner, you get a lot of stuff. And if you're a silver partner, you get a little less. If you're a bronze partner, you get a little less. But to go to the companies like a marketing agency would, and I have a chapter in my book for this reason called the marketing agency model, and going to companies in the same way that a marketing or ad agency would. And even if a company goes to a marketing agency and says, oh, we want ads in all the trade publications, that'll really help us sell more product and get our message out there. A good marketing agency would say, well, let's back up the train a little bit. Let's talk about your company's goals. Who do you want to reach? How do you want to reach them? What messages do you want to reach? How do you want to change the audience's mind? And when we as association staff begin to ask companies those questions and not to sell anything, and I usually start off these exploratory conversations with companies by saying, we are selling nothing today. We want to learn about your company. We want to see if there's a match between what your company's goals are and what we have to offer, and to ask all of those exploratory relationship building questions. And I find the companies are like, oh, we thought you were going to sell today. It's like, no, we're not selling. We want to learn about your company's goals. And then I take that information from those discussions with each of the companies, and then I would suggest that director of sponsorships for the association should go back to the association staff, and whether that's 5 staff or 50 staff in 5 departments, and talk to each department and say, wow, this company really seems to want to focus on digital. What sort of products do we have, or what sort of outreach do we have that's digital? Or the company really seems they have a new product, they really want to do a product demo at our conference. How would we make that work? And then to go back to each company and to say, if I heard you correctly, here are your 6 goals. We've outlined a 5-point program for how you can achieve those 6 goals with our association in the coming year. And we're going to offer these digital assets, and we're going to offer you a demo stage at the convention. And we're going to offer a couple other things, and we're going to do some social media around that. Oh, and by the way, we have a corporate advisory council. As a top year-long corporate partner, you can have a seat at the advisory council. How does that sound? And, with a little tweaking and some conversations, in many cases, companies are like, wow, we've never had that sort of approach. So it's unique and it's beneficial to the companies. It's starting by recognizing and achieving each company's goals and coming up with a customized approach. Does that take more time than the older model? It's a different sort of time. In the transition in the association where I used to work, they had a larger association. They had 250 sponsors. They had conference sponsors. They had webinar sponsors. They had year-long sponsors. They had sponsors of other things during the year. And we pared that down from 250 sponsor companies to 20 sponsor companies, year-long companies, very focused on these big partner relationships. And the revenue difference, it was an increase in revenue from the 250 companies to the 20 companies because we focused on value for the companies, value for members, and the sponsor fees were higher. And from the work standpoint, yes, instead of trying to herd cats with 250 companies sending in logos and having questions and all that, my job when I worked for that association was providing, like a marketing agency, account exec service to those 20 companies. So I think that's the model we're looking at for the offer to companies and for how we staff it internally.
Fantastic. So, Bruce, we covered a lot today. We have a couple of questions. I think we have time to get into one from the audience. How's that sound?
Great.
All right. We got a question here that reads, if most of our current sponsorships are event-based, how can we start shifting them into partnerships?
If most of the sponsorships are event-based, I would start by really looking at all of your sponsors and what do they spend throughout the year. So you may offer, of course, conference sponsorships. Do they buy ads during the year? Are there any a la carte sponsorships they buy? And trying to find out which companies are really spending the most, because sometimes we find that companies are making 4, 5, 6 different purchases during the year, and it becomes a significant amount of money. I would identify those 5, 10, 15 companies that are spending the most and meeting with them, calling with them, having a call with them, and really asking them more about their goals, saying that you're thinking of revamping your sponsorship partnership program into a year-long program, just asking for their input instead of trying to develop it internally and then going back to them a few months later and saying, oh, we developed something new. Do you like it? But to try to get their buy-in doesn't mean you have to do everything they ask, but to get their input, their buy-in on what a new program would look like, and then to follow it through from there. It's not going to be the right fit for every company. There definitely should be those more transactional. If somebody wants a booth or an ad, that's fine. But once you find that small segment of companies that are interested in being the year-long corporate partner, because as good as any association's conference could be, or is, what I hear from companies is fantastic conference. It was for 3 days, and even with a little pre and post visibility. What about the other 360 some days of the year? How can we get our message out there? Not every day, but can we do something quarterly? Can we do something every other month with the association? Can we take something that we did at that booth that was very successful and do that as a webinar or do that as a social media post during the year? But a lot of it is just that open-ended conversation, not going to companies with a long list of, oh, here are 10 things you get, or at this level, but having a conversation with the company and then trying to find that win-win between what the association has to offer and what the company would like to achieve with the association.
Creating opportunities for both sponsors and members all year long, I think, is a great note to end on. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insight on how associations can grow non-dues revenue through stronger partnerships. Before we wrap up, where can folks follow your work?
Great. So I am an active poster on LinkedIn with a lot of different strategies and tips. So you can find me, Bruce Rosenthal, on LinkedIn. My book, as Marcus said, is Mastering Association Corporate Sponsorships. It's on Amazon. If you search for Master Association Corporate Sponsorships and my last name, Rosenthal, you should find the book on Amazon. And there's more information on my website with about the book, as well as about tips and strategies and articles and white papers on my website, brucerosenthal.associates.
Fantastic. And for everyone watching, if you're thinking about how to strengthen your member experience and revenue strategy, we built something that can help you with that. It's called the Digital Member Value Audit, and it's completely free. You'll get a short personalized report that looks at how your website performs in three key areas: content, member experience, and revenue opportunities. You can find information at tailwinddigital.com/audit. To everyone watching, thanks again for joining us. And if you missed any of our past sessions, you can find it on our website at the Tailwind Content Media Hub. Take care, everyone.